Hello and welcome back to Let's Play Xenogears. We are coming to a close with this game, actually. It's been a while. I've been doing these Let's Play series, this series here, for nearly a year now. Actually, more than a year. It's insane. But we're finally coming to a close, and all that's really left that we have to do is to head into what remains of Merkava and go and confront Deus head-to-head. But I have one more episode of just screwing around that I want to do. And this is going to be it. It's going to be a very long episode because I want to get all this stuff in at once. It's going to be a little over 40 minutes long. Now, as you've noticed, we can head back out into the world map for the first time since before heading off to Solaris near the end of Disc 1. I mean, wow, this is a long time coming. But we can head back out into the world now, and we'll notice a lot of things have changed. For one thing, a lot of the places that used to be able to go to, like Bledivac or Bart's Hideout or Dazzle or most of the cities or towns, stuff like that, you can't get into them anymore. They're still on the map, but you can't access them. You go up to them and you can't go into the city. I'm assuming that means that everybody who lived in them is dead. So there's a mass extinction of human beings, you know. You can go to a few places here, like here, this location here, is the Anima Dungeon 1. That was where we fought the elements, we picked up the Anima Relic for Billy's Gear Renzo, and all of that. Now we can head up... Where did I go next? Oh, yes. This is Tara's house. To get to that, you have to jump out of your gear and go through the woods. Now, none of this stuff was on the map before the end of Disc 1, because remember, the gates were still up, and the gates were concealing the land, so people couldn't really see what the land looked like. All part of the Gazel's Ministry's plan on controlling everything. Now, the only reason why you go here is because Tara gives you some stuff. Let's see what that is. Alrighty, we got some stuff from Tara, and now we can move on. Head back out to the Yggdrasil, and it can fly still. So that's good. Now, I guess I was heading up to Nortune next. You can get back into Nortune now. Despite the fact that the war between Aerith and Kisilve... Oh, this was the mass driver, the rocket facility that they launched the nanomachines from the beginning of Disc 2. Now, despite the fact that the war is long over, and for the most part, Aerith appears to have been destroyed. You can't get into Bledivac. I don't see an Aerith flag flying in the remains of Shivat. Kisilve, on the other hand, does seem to be enduring. They're like the Energizer Bunny, I guess. The actual city, you can get back into still. But it's different. You can't go into most of the blocks, to the different blocks, you know, like A block, D block, all that kind of crap. And the big tower and the big machine in the center, the big building, is gone. Because remember, that turned into a gigantic gear that Bart used to destroy Fort Hurricane, as well as take down Merkava in the last episode. One thing you can do, however, is go over here to the battling arena. And you can battle! You can still battle, and there's actually... the battling is the way it was when we were trying to escape from Kisilve, where it sort of plays like a weird fighting game, weird 3D fighting game. The battling is the same as that, but the reason why you do it is because you get battling points, and you can use those battling points to acquire things. For the most part, you do this so you can get special items to equip on your gear to make them more powerful. But I don't really have the patience to go through that, especially for a Let's Play series. I mean, come on. It'd take way too long. You know, it really would. It would take forever. So I'm not going to be doing any of this. But we find Big Joe. Of course, Big Joe's still around. That creepy Elvis-looking bastard will never die, apparently. That's basically all you can do. That crystal in the center, you can turn in items for, just like you could in D-Block back when this was a real city. Get money. In fact, you're probably going to want to at least do that, even though I didn't really. Because at the end of this game, there's going to be a lot of items that you're going to want to buy. Gear upgrades and all of that. But it is very expensive. And even though I was being rather conservative with my expenditures throughout the entire game, saving up money the entire game, you still do not have enough money to buy all this stuff. So I'm probably going to have to play for a good half an hour or so off camera, just to get the kind of money I need to buy the upgrades that I want on my gears. Up here, you will find Anima Dungeon 2. Remember the underground cave where we got Rico's gears upgrade, as well as fought Hammer, killed Hammer. And now we'll head down to the lighthouse. Now remember the ancient city that was buried under the ground where we found, oh, this here's Merkava, what's remains of it. Deus is in there. Or that is Deus, rather than just being its vessel. But remember back when we first found Emeralda and were attacked by id over top of a city? An ancient city. Well, this is where it is. This is a way into it. This is a lighthouse, they say, but the city is beneath it. Now, I switched party members. I brought Rico along only because I haven't used him much in the game, and I may not use him again for the rest of the game, so might as well use him at least one last time. But I'm also bringing around Emerald, and I'm doing that for a very good reason, and you'll see that up ahead. You want to have Emerald in your group. The only problem is I did not upgrade Emeralda's gear before bringing her down here, so her gear was sadly underpowered for this portion of the game. It's about time that we've had long sections of gameplay without being constantly bombarded with storyline. And I'm going to take this final opportunity to really go over the story up until this point. I'm going to kind of summarize it. Back over 10,000 years ago, humanity was, or it might still be, actually, traveling around the stars, colonizing the galaxy, whatever. A war started, and in order to bring the war to a close, one of the two sides, we don't really have any information on what side, what they were called, or anything like that. All we really know is that they created Deus. Deus is an ultimate weapon, which was designed to basically bring a quick end to the war. Now, in order to power it, they had to hook up the Zohar modifier directly to it. What the Zohar was, it was a machine that was either constructed or found by humanity. Some of the sources I've read say that Zohar was merely found, as their wave existence seems to indicate that the Zohar was built by humanity. But anyway, the Zohar was hooked up to Deus, and when they went to test it, they fired the thing up, and they hooked the Zohar up to it, and they unleashed it on the planet to see how much damage it would do. Deus drew an enormous amount of power from the Zohar, more than anyone ever even figured the thing could probably do, because they figured Zohar was a perpetual motion machine that could produce infinite amounts of energy with zero input. In reality, what Zohar did was reach into a higher dimension and draw power from there. Seemed like it was free, seemed like it's infinite. But Deus drew so much power that it actually reached up into the higher dimension and pulled down the wave existence, which is in a sense, is essentially God. Pulled the wave existence down, and the wave existence had no choice but to get itself stuck inside of Zohar, and Zohar became its prison. Also, it allowed the Zohor to produce infinite amounts of energy, which Deus required in order to perform its functions, and it was so much power that Deus went wild and blew the hell out of the planet, essentially destroyed it. Here's something to look at. Well, the people in control of Deus decide, holy shit, this is not right. We can't have this, nobody deserves this much power, no one can handle this much power. So they dismantled Deus, and they stuck it on a ship traveling the Eldridge, that ship we saw in the beginning of the game. They stuck it on that, and as it was being taken through space, something happened. What happened was a child named Abel, which was, for all intents and purposes, Fae, came across the Zohor, just wandered up to it. Now, something was wrong with Abel. He was something involving his mother. Either his mother was missing, or his mother was dead, or he couldn't find his mother. Who the hell knows? But the Zohor, or rather the wave existence inside the Zohor, made contact with him. See, the wave existence wanted out. It did not want to be stuck. Oh, here's some little backstory on Big Joe. How the man is 10,000 years ago, or 4,000 years ago, I have no friggin' idea. But he thinks he's Elvis. Anyway, the wave existence made contact with Abel, and in a certain kind of concept, merged with him. And the wave existence took on a kind of motherly kind of nature. Wanted to protect Abel in a certain perspective. So it did two things. It gave Abel the power of the contact, which is essentially like the power of God, which is the reason why guys like Id had so much power. And it also created a woman to essentially be a protector, a motherly figure to Abel. Oh, Big Joe owns a friggin' shop down in this ancient city. He's surrounded by these boxes, which come with some free stuff, which is usually no good. But Big Joe himself has some of the best gear equipment in the game. It's not all stuff that you can use or want to use. Like, for example, these engines. I would not use these engines because if you notice the amount of fuel that it lets you have, 1,000 fuel, 2,000 fuel, 1,500 fuel, is much less than the 7,000 fuel that Xenogears currently has. So you don't really want to do this unless you're going to take one or two gears to give this kind of ability to and only use them for a couple of battles later on. The armor, though, you're going to want to buy the armor. Only it's very expensive, and you may not have enough to buy it for every gear. So where was I back in this story? Oh, well, anyway, the wave existence gave Abel his power, its power and said, "Get me out of here. Do what you have to do. Destroy the Zohar modifier." And by doing this, it created a woman for Faye. Or not Faye, for Abel. Created a woman for Abel to essentially watch over him and sort of be his protector. The problem is, in order to do this, it needed to activate a piece of Deus. It activated a kind of a pod, a biological computer, which was used by Deus to function, in order to create this woman. Well, that one little act reactivated Deus. Realizing that it was on a ship being dismantled and was going to be destroyed, it went nuts and took control of the ship. And those were the events that we saw in the beginning of the game, during that opening cinematic. Well, the captain, realizing that, oh no, we're screwed. No one's going to survive this, so I'm going to destroy the ship before Deus gets a chance to get away and wreak God knows how much havoc on the universe. So he destroyed the ship. Now Deus, despite being oh so powerful, oh, notice this, once you go back into this room, the boxes reappear. So you might want to do that a few times, see what you get. Okay, Deus was extremely powerful, but it wasn't yet complete. It was still reassembling itself, so it knew it would not survive the combination of the ship explosion and the physical impact of it on the surface of the planet it was orbiting around. So it immediately sprung into oh jeez, let me start that again. It sprung into action an amazingly complex plan. It took that woman that was created for Abel, who was essentially Ellie, and jammed a piece of its own program in there. That piece of program was Mayang. It also impregnated this woman with several different people. Primarily it was Emperor Cain and the Gazel Ministry. And as soon as she came out of that out of the pod, and this was the woman that we saw in the beginning of the game during the opening cinematic. Soon after that, she spat out these little bastards, and they went along preparing for the resurrection of Deus. Most likely, she also spat out a bunch of other people who contributed, basically, the start of human civilization. Okay, now this is what we really came down here to see. Notice Kim was a painter too. Emeralda's an adult now. Doesn't really change how she plays, but it does change her sprite and all that. Well, anyway, these people started human civilization on this planet. And it was basically being controlled by the Gasl Ministry, by Emperor Cain and Mayang from the beginning. But they were not the only people on the planet. Abel actually survived the crash. The kid that was on board the ship survived the crash, and he went on living in this society that the basically Deus had created. Realizing, though, that this was really screwed up, and that all the people that were living in ignorance of what their purpose of their life was, and how the Gasl Ministry and all that were manipulating them, tried to control them. Well, during this time, actually when he was a child, I think, he encountered Ellie. Now, not specifically the same person that... Oh, you get to see Emeralda fighting. The Ellie that he ran into wasn't specifically the same person that was created for him. Actually, she's sort of like a descendant, because that original woman that was created for Faye died almost immediately after giving birth to the birth of human civilization on the planet. She crawled back into her pod and then died there, and we actually ran across her body. But Ellie, the first Ellie that Faye met, came across him when he was a child. And we saw, like, a dream that Faye had of this way back in the beginning of the game. Well, Faye and Ellie, or Abel and Ellie, rather, tried leading an uprising against Cain and the Gazel Ministry, and it didn't work out for them. Ellie got killed. Cain killed Ellie, and then Cain probably killed Abel, true to its biblical roots. And apparently, Cain felt bad about that too, because that's what changed his whole perspective on the being something, oh, maybe I should help humanity rather than trying to exterminate it. Anyway, with those two out of the way, the pieces of the Deus system, which all three, the Cain, the Gazel Ministry, and Mayang, were all parts of the Deus system. Oh wow, this is really disjointed. I'm saying this all the way out of order. But anyway, Cain was a contact, meaning Cain is the physical representation, or was the physical representation, of Deus's connection to the way of existence in the Zohar modifier. So it needed to reabsorb Cain, or an equivalent of Cain, in order to gain its, essentially, power source back. That was the purpose of Cain. Mayang was part of its biological computer. She was sort of like a kind of portion of its intelligence. The Gazel Ministry, on the other hand, were what were called the Animus. They were parts of Deus's kind of like close defense kind of situation. They were individual small weapons that were part of a whole that would engage like specific targets one-on-one rather than the entire Deus system, which is more like a weapons platform rather than this one specific weapon. So they were a little bit more like Gears in terms of the concept. Also the Anima Relics, which, you know, Anima, Animus, were equal halves of the same part. So an Animus, which were the Gazel Ministry, and an Anima, which were the Anima Relics, merged together and form individual weapons, which were part of the Deus system. Where we are is Duneman Isle. This is a place you're probably going to want to go, but they have some surprisingly difficult enemies, and you can't bring gears here. So you have to fight on foot. The last place that you really have to do this in the game. Now, the only reason why you want to go here is because it has some really good items that you probably want to get. Or you may want to get. You don't really even have to do this. Okay. Going back to what I was talking about before. Human civilization continued on for 6,000 years. But there was a problem. The humans started to have weird genetic degradation. They started straying too far away from what Deus needed, because these people were really just biological components of the Deus system, and they would be integrated back in the Deus when the time came for it to be resurrected. But this genetic degradation, or maybe you could say evolution, I don't know, was causing them to stray too far away from what Deus needed. And these people were actually very advanced. They're more advanced than even Solaris was. They had... Kim was one of these people. Ellie of the time was one of these people. They had airplanes, they had tanks, they built their own gears. Ah, dragon. The most difficult enemy to fight in Duneman Isle. And it's actually kind of difficult if you don't take the right strategy. What you want to do is just rely on Faye to do all the damage she can, using at least this attack. Don't use any of the elemental death blows, because it'll actually heal the dragon. And as long as he survives the initial attack, you're probably good. Has an HP of around maybe 10,000. Well, anyway, with all these people becoming unsuitable for Deus, Mayang, who had kind of maneuvered herself into a position of power among the government of the world, one of the governments in the world anyway, went and, oh geez, it's attacking, started a war, which ended up with killing most of humanity. Something like 95% of humanity was destroyed by this war, and the genetic degradation prevented a lot of other people from breeding, so there was no reproduction of a lot of people. Only a small number managed to survive, and these people were essentially considered the strongest or the most suitable for Deus, you know. And this small core of people were where civilization was rebuilt back up from. But all the previous technology was basically lost, and occasionally it would be stumbled across and reintegrated back into society and stuff, but for the most part everybody went back to the Stone Age. Fast forward 3,500 years, and what we have is Solaris, the country which, basically the same country that we're aware of today, existed. Emperor Cain, the Castle Ministry, Mayang was involved. It was basically trying to control the population, because it was nearing its eventual goal of resurrecting Deus. But something happened rather unexpected. Shivat, another country which at the time existed at the top of Babel Tower, which Babel Tower itself was just a part of the Eldridge, or a piece of it that flung off when it exploded. Shivat formed a kind of a team with Nisan in order to oppose Solaris, because Solaris wasn't the secretive organization it is today, that most people don't really understand it. At the time, it was very open in its oppression over humanity. Well, there was this war between the two, and eventually, I mean, I went through all this before, it ends. A number of the individuals end up dying on both sides. Specifically, Sophia, who was the Ellie of that time, dies, and two individuals, Carillion, who decided he wanted to resurrect Deus because, as far as he was concerned, God didn't exist because he allowed such horrible things to happen, so he would create God if he had to. God being Deus. And Lacan, who eventually became known as Graf, realizing, holy crap, I'm so weak, I should have been stronger, or else if I were stronger I could have helped Ellie, you know, all that kind of crap. He goes frickin' ballistic, and he goes in search of the power. By the power, he meant the wave existence, the Zohar modifier. So he would make contact with it, and he would get incredible power. It had this weird thing of fracturing his personality, blah 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 blah. But most importantly, something that was really only glossed over in the history of this game, but it was nonetheless a rather important thing. After finding the power and understanding the knowledge and gaining all the memory of his past lives, of what had happened, the nature of humanity and all that, he found out about the Deus system and parts of its weapon systems, specifically what became known in the world of Xenogears as the Diablos, the kind of powerful weapons that Deus used to assault whatever. Well, he took control of these systems and used them to waylay the entire planet, not just Solaris, not just Shivat, or not even just Nisan. He didn't even discriminate against his targets. If they existed and they were on Earth, they were going to die, because he wanted everybody to die. He wanted everyone to die for what happened. He was a very screwed up individual. Well, eventually the Diablos were defeated and Graf was killed. But his body existed apart from his mind, and his mind managed to linger on, continue living on, and inhabit different hosts, and that's what he did for another 500 years. Following the war, hoping to, at least in some way, survive the potential reprisal of Solaris, which was in no good position to continue fighting, Shivat went and broke off a Babel tower and flying through the sky, put a gate generator around their city so they couldn't be attacked. Solaris took a very different approach. Oh, this worm here may look like a very difficult enemy, but it's a little wuss. A good ether attack will kill it. Solaris took a very different side of this. Kerillian, who had lost faith in his humanity and wanted to essentially create God, came to Solaris and said, I can help you out. And he appealed specifically to Emperor Cain, because Emperor Cain had a very different perspective on humanity than Myang or the Gazel Ministry had. He was more of the mind that, I should help humanity now. He probably didn't even want anything to do with the Shivat-Solaris war. It's hard to tell what was going through Cain's mind. But anyway, Kerillian came to him and said, you want to help humanity? I want to help humanity. I have these nanomachines here that can be used to help people live longer. You help me work my research, and I'll help you help people. Also notice, I followed these sand sharks before to the left, but now I'm going to go straight north, because it leads to something else. Well, Kerillian had gained a position in Solaris through Emperor Cain, and as Cain got older, Kerillian assumed a more and more significant role in Solaris' government. Eventually, he became what you would consider to be the true ruler of the country. Hey, look, it's a dragon. There's a sword stuck in its back that you want to get to. A sword for Saitan. Well, it was this appeal to reason, appeal to Emperor Cain that gave Kerillian his power, and he eventually started plotting against Cain when he realized that Cain really wasn't going to go forward with the plan to resurrect Deus. Gazel Ministry had no friggin' idea, but Myang and Kerillian did. So those two ended up working together a lot. This is how you get up. You climb up its vertebrae. Damn it! Well, anyway. Kerillian used nanomachines to extend his own lifespan. He used those to keep Cain alive for longer because it was thought that Cain was required for Deus to be reborn. In reality, Faye would have worked just as well, because Faye is a contact as well. They both have the same power. But it wasn't always possible to find the Wave Existence's contact rather than Deus's contact. But something else got thrown into another wrench got thrown into the gears. That was a weird little cut there. When Graf came back with the Diablos invasion, most of the people in humanity, something like 95% of the people in humanity, were killed again. All these people were dead. Not enough spare parts for humanity. Not enough spare parts for Deus. So they had to rebuild civilization again. Also a problem, in the Diablos War, the Gazel Ministry were killed. They were dead. Deus cannot be resurrected without them. They are part of the terminal interface weapons. They're other half of the anima relics. They were necessary. They were also the only ones who could activate the Gattaca key, which would allow the Eldridge to be reactivated. But Kerillian had a backup plan. His most immediate thing was he took their minds and put them into a computer called the SOL 9000, which I can only assume means shit out of luck. He also took their genes, their genetic makeup, and through the limiter system that Kerillian invented and had every single human on the surface installed with, their genes were disseminate it into the general population. Now the Gazel Ministry just thought Carillion was putting these genes out there so eventually we'd have suitable bodies for us to move into. In reality, the only reason why he did it was because he wanted their bodies, the animus bodies, to resurrect Deus with. He didn't give a rat's ass about the Gazel Ministry. That's why he eventually killed them. Because they're in his way and he didn't like them. I mean, he really didn't have to kill them. He just did, probably out of spite, because they were kind of dickheads. This is a good way to escape, because it can be kind of hard to get out of Duneman Isle. Okay, there's one more thing I want to check out before this episode comes to a close. Remember that guy that was back at the Shivat ruins that wanted me to give him a gold nugget to go and dig? And I gave it to him. And I went back later, off camera, and talked to him again, and he said he didn't find anything. Then he wanted me to give him some gold bullion to dig further. And like an idiot, I went and did it again. Well, I'm going to head back here and check out what he had found. Because he has found something by now. It's a jukebox. Well, with my little music selection here, I have come to the end of this rather long episode. And in the next one, we are finally going to go take the pain to Deus. So, make sure you don't miss that one.